Kudiri, and it's time for our hashtag Africa Focus feature. If you're new to the show, this is the part of the show where we look at some of the biggest stories on the African continent. And this time around, we'll be heading over to our neighbors, Zimbabwe, right next door of the Limpopo River. And we'll be looking at what was a very, very high stakes outcome. Zimbabwe's Constitutional Court has reserved judgment in a high-profile legal challenge over the controversial Constitutional Amendment Bill number 3 legislation, proposing essentially sweeping changes to Zimbabwe's constitutional framework. And among the most contentious proposals are plans, and I think this is the most important one, plans to extend presidential and parliamentary terms for 5 years to 7 years. So this would essentially change how the president is elected by shifting from a direct public vote election where the constituency people across Zimbabwe vote and restructure it to an electoral administration of some sort. And it will also alter the role of independent constitutional institutions. And critics are arguing that this amendment could concentrate power and also weaken democratic oversight. While supporters of it say the reforms are necessary, they're necessary for governance stability and long-term national development. I'm not sure how much that argument holds water, but adding further significance to the legal challenge, judges during the Constitutional Court proceedings reportedly raised very, very serious questions around whether constitutional changes of this scale may require a national referendum. So basically have the whole country vote on whether or not to amend the constitution, and potentially placing Zimbabwean voters directly at the center of deciding the country's constitutional future. And I think that would be an interesting reality to see the outcome of whether or not the people of Zimbabwe would vote essentially for President Emmerson Mnangagwa to extend his tenure as president by another, 2-3 years maybe. So we're going to be unpacking that, and to help us unpack that specifically, we're joined by chairperson of the Zim-Community in South Africa, Ngqabutho Nicholas Mabhena. Mabhena, thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure having you on News and Views. I really appreciate you giving us your time.
The pleasure is mine. Morning to you and a morning to the viewers out there.
And I think we'll jump right into it. For our listeners who have not really followed the story quite closely, I think the most simplest way to put it for everyone to understand is essentially President Emmerson Mnangagwa wants to extend his tenure as president of Zimbabwe by seeking constitutional amendments to Bill number 3. Would that be the right way to, put it, to phrase it from your point of view, how you've analyzed it?
It is a diplomatic way of saying it, but what we know is that he does not want to leave the office. If I would put it bluntly, so because like we are saying, the 2013 Constitution has a 2-term limits. He wants now arguing that he needs to extend it to 2030. To finish whatever projects he claims to have started since 2017. Thereafter, then have elections. But we know that after 2030, he will once again want to amend the constitution to stay in power. Reason being is that ZANU-PF, as a part itself founded in 1963, it has never had a smooth succession inside itself. So Mnangagwa does not want to be the first one to hand the baton. He has an opportunity to do so, and we are calling on him just for his own legacy to say, in the history of ZANU-PF, Emmerson Mnangagwa went to the ZANU-PF 2027 Congress, handed over power to a new person who will then represent ZANU-PF as a presidential candidate in the 2028 elections. This is what President Emmerson Mnangagwa needs to do. This is what his friends need to tell him. But of course, he wants to stay in power for life.
And I think that's a very, very concerning state of affairs. And what was interesting for me is the fact that those that are in support of these proposals to extend presidential and parliamentary terms are saying they're doing it for stability. It says for long-term stability. It's of the benefit of the country. From your point of view, how do you make that make of that argument that it's stable, it's going to give the president more time to be, as you mentioned, finish off the projects that he started? Does it hold water, that argument, from your point of view?
It does not, because what brings stability in a nation is that elections are held in a free and a fair environment where political parties, individuals, citizens who want to stand as candidates or want to support a candidate of their own, they are free to express their will. Stability comes when we follow the constitutional guidelines in holding democratic elections. Stability comes when we follow SADC guidelines on conducting free and fair elections. All this is missing in Zimbabwe. So there is no question of stability. And you cannot say that this will bring stability when you are closing down everyone who is opposed to this proposal. Of course, the Zimbabwean constitution has a clause that it can be amended, but there are processes of carrying out this amendment. The first process is that when you are talking of a presidential extension, it must not benefit the incumbent. In other words, President Mnangagwa should not be the beneficiary. And secondly, after understanding this, it must then go to the people in a referendum. All these two are missing. So there's no stability. This is why you then have others going to court, because they say that as the only avenue now open, because we saw the chaotic constitutional process, consultations by the Parliament of Zimbabwe, where those that are opposed to this were closed down, and only the advocates of this amendment, constitutional amendment, were allowed to raise their voices.
No, most definitely. And I want us to come back to the tenure of President Emmerson Mnangagwa. He's been in power, I think, since 2017, if I'm not mistaken, after that quote-unquote soft coup that ousted long-term president, the late Robert Mugabe. From your perspective, it's been, almost 8-9 years now. How would you assess his tenure as president of Zimbabwe? Are there any notable changes to speak of? Are there, any projects that he mentions that could maybe make an argument for him to extend his stay as you would wish to?
No, his only achievement, which benefits him, his family, his ethnic group, is that he has dismantled the hegemony that enjoyed by Shona subgroup called the Mugabe subgroup. Now power is concentrated within the Garanga subgroup. So he has built an elite within the Garanga the ethnic group. You see these billionaires, the nucleus that he has created, they are all from the Garanga ethnic group. This is what Emmerson Mnangagwa has achieved. So in terms of development, there is nothing really that one can write home about. Of the Beitbridge border post, which ZANU-PF members always credit him. When we say, no, this man has not done anything, they then throw the Beitbridge border post. That was a Mugabe project. Yes, he simply completed it. He completed that project, but he was not the initiator.
There's a reality or a possibility that the decision could now be at the hands of Zimbabweans, a referendum on whether or not these amendments can be made to the constitution. If that's the reality, how do you see Zimbabweans voting? Do you see them making a change to the constitution? Would that be a reality on the ground? Would it be one that is, democratic, or it would be persuaded or manipulated in a way to make sure that that reality does come to life?
We are not sure if a referendum is going to be held. Because going through the parliamentary process was exactly trying to avoid the referendum, because he knows that the people will not support this. So what he has then done is to cow everyone that is opposed. Then that at the end, if a referendum were to happen, it is going to be similar to what we saw in the last elections, where
Mm.
the majority voice is being suppressed, where the referendum itself process is not going to be free and fair, because he wants to deliver this extension. But of course, we do not know what he spoke with President Cyril Ramaphosa when 2 weeks ago he visited him on the farm. There were theories that were thrown out in terms of what they were discussing. So in the absence of what was discussed, and of course these days you see there's a bit of silence from those that have been making lots of noise about these amendments. So we do not know what the plan from their end is, whether they might want to use the constitutional court to then find a way out, because in the history of Zimbabwe, ZANU-PF has never lost in a court case. It was only in 2013 when we were going to elections, Mugabe was leading the unity government in Zimbabwe, which the partners were saying postpone the elections. Then Mugabe appeared to be in support until one Julius Mawere went to court against the unity government. Mugabe accepted defeat, which of course that defeating was in favor of Mugabe because he wanted elections. So after speaking to President Cyril Ramaphosa, assuming President Cyril Ramaphosa took a hard line on the constitutional amendment, and Mnangagwa now wants to serve face and please his counterparts, he might then use the court case as a way of getting out of what he has put himself into.
Very, very interesting times ahead for Zimbabwe. But Mabhena, thank you so much for chatting to us. And I'm pretty sure we'll be chatting again soon as the story develops. We're going to leave it there for now.
The pleasure is mine. Have a great day.
There you go. That has been a hashtag Africa Focus feature looking at Zimbabwe and what could potentially be a really, really interesting time ahead. Probably referendum on whether or not President Emmerson Mnangagwa should have another 2-3 years in his term as president of Zimbabwe. We wait with bated breath to see if that will be the reality. You're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with you after this.